Welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root, where we dive deep into understanding and addressing root causes of chronic health issues so you can help and find healing inside and out, now and forever. Hello, and welcome to Trifecta Collective, Finding the Root. I'm Megan Abbott, owner and founder of the holistic health practice, Trifecta Collective. Welcome to the podcast. So today we are continuing on the conversation of how do you actually know you're in perimenopause and menopause. So this is going to be part 2, which depending on how this goes, this may be the final episode. It also might be part 2 of 3. We'll kind of see how much I get through today. And if you didn't listen to the first episode, go back and listen to that. We talked about really early signs starting in your 30s into kind of your early to mid 40s when you're in more full-blown perimenopause. And now today we're going to be talking about the transition, more so the transition from like late perimenopause into actual menopause and some of the shifts and changes that can happen. And then TBD if I get to this today, I also want to talk about the role of hormones as we age, because I also think this is really important. Once again, nobody teaches us this. And there are some very preventable, we can say preventative, maybe not even preventative, but a lot of considerations to take into account when it comes to our overall health. And anytime we work with someone who's typically in their 50s, 60s, 70s, not only are we focused on root cause health and root cause issues, but we're really focused on longevity. How can we make sure our body's in the best place and stay in the best place that it can be as we age? Because there are natural things that happen as we age, and there are a lot of things that are preventable and maybe not even fully preventable, but things that we're able to kind of push out into older ages so that we can maintain our freedom, our health, physical health. Cognitive health is a really big one. Stay off as many medications as possible and different things like that. And women's health is so different than men's. And once again, we know if we look physiologically, these differences and the role that hormones, specifically estrogen and progesterone, play in women's health. And there are certain risks and certain other factors that go into our long-term health that a lot of people aren't talking about. And once again, the goal is education. Education is power. The more knowledge you can have, the better questions you can ask to your physician and other health providers, the better you can equip yourself and understand your own body. Because I know, I know firsthand, and also as a practitioner, how confusing so much of our health, especially as women, that this can be. And there are some really oftentimes simple explanations for a lot of these things. And when we start to understand and learn more from a physiological perspective, what is actually going on, this can bring us a little bit more peace of mind. This can help us prepare and support our bodies in different ways. I also think for me, understanding the why behind certain things helps me better form new habits and be consistent with those habits. And we're going to talk about some of those things today here. So I'm going to pick up right where we left off from our last episode, getting into more later perimenopause into early menopause. And what does this really look like? So this is often going to happen starting in our mid to late 40s, sometimes into our early 50s. There is a wide difference in ages that this can really happen. And once again, I do think we have control over some of this. And I do think some of it's just naturally what our body is going to do. And maybe we can't, quote unquote, fix it. However, we can support our bodies in different ways to make this transition as easy and as less frustrating as we absolutely can. So during this time, our periods are going to become pretty irregular. We might really start to skip periods like whole months. Maybe we miss a few months at a time. Maybe our cycles start to get really long. Instead of getting, as to earlier perimenopause, our cycles are starting to get shorter, where they may be closer to 21 to 26 days. Some people will say, if their cycles were longer, maybe they bump up to 28 days. But now typically we're going to start skipping periods. We're going to start seeing other kind of shifts in our periods. We're also going to start missing ovulation, which I think is really important that we understand. And this is why just starting to understand and know our bodies as early as possible, and it's never too late, really, really is helpful. And I really am surprised at the number of younger women I talk to, specifically women in their 20s and 30s, who, when I ask, hey, do you know when you ovulate? And the answer is no. And I think one of the most beneficial one of the most beneficial things that we can do, especially in our 20s and 30s, is be very aware of our cycles, what is going on in our cycles, how are our bodies changing throughout our cycles, when are we ovulating? Because while I don't love the idea of totally rescheduling our lives, our workouts, our nutrition, all of those things around our cycles, I do think there is a lot of valuable information that we can know and recognize. Whereas, for example, the week before our period, I see and hear so many women, and I heard this especially as a personal trainer, their strength going down, they're extra tired, they can't push as hard, the same level of energy and drive just isn't there. And the reality is, it's not going to be. That is not the time where we should actually try and pursue a PR, a personal record, where we should be really trying to push ourselves the most. Because our body's doing other things. Our body's getting ready to release that uterine lining. It's our estrogen is at its lowest. Our progesterone is at its highest. Progesterone and cortisol, like I mentioned in the first episode, on a handful of occasions, do not mix. And when the cortisol goes up, which is a response to stress, there are good stressors, and working out is a good stressor. So we just have to be mindful of it. It can tank our progesterone because there is an inverted relationship. As cortisol goes up, progesterone is going to drop. Progesterone and stress do not mix very well. And so if we can minimize the stress before the week, especially the week before a period, and sometimes this is really like 10 to 12 days before a period, depending on the woman, the better. And that doesn't mean don't work out. It doesn't mean don't strength train. It just means, hey, maybe we're not trying to actively push ourselves right now, and also not beating ourselves up if we're not able to push ourselves. So these are just some things to think about and be mindful of. If you have a big presentation and you have the capacity to schedule that, schedule it in the first half of your cycle or right around ovulation. That's typically going to be, for most women, the best time for communication, for confidence, for clarity, for cognitive health. We do have shifts and changes, and to be that's not something to beat our bodies up about. It's not something to be hard on ourselves about. If we embrace these natural shifts and changes, there are strengths to all of these phases, and we can use that as a tool to better understand ourselves, how we want to show up, how we show up in our relationships, professional, personal, with a significant other, with family, like all of those things. And that's to be celebrated, even though our society is not built around women's health. Our society is built around men's health and the 24-hour cycle that they go through with their hormones. That is the reality of the situation. And unless you create your own business and set up your own schedule and are in a place where you have more of that flexibility, that is how it is. And once again, it's about how can we shift and support our bodies and maybe even talk to ourselves, have our self-talk be a little bit different as we go through these. Sorry, I digress. I like to do that. So we're missing ovulation. We're maybe missing some periods now. And what is happening inside of our body is, we talked about this progesterone is the first thing that's typically going to start to drop. And then estrogen starts to go on this massive roller coaster of highs and lows and everything in between. Now we're seeing that estrogen being consistently lower. So now we're getting a lower progesterone, lower estrogen overall. So this might feel like hot flashes and night sweats. And for some women, those are just beginning. For others, they are really ramping up. A lot more sleep issues overall, waking up in the middle of the night, having a hard time going back to sleep, a lot of insomnia type issues. Even if you've never experienced insomnia issues, you might have significant mood swings, anxiety, depression. Just your emotions really might feel literally all over the place. This is also, looking at social media and the whole perimenopause movement and all the things going on. This is your I don't give an F kind of area where estrogen and the progesterone that we have had helps us be nurturing, help us be caregivers, helps us sometimes to our detriment over care for others while sometimes neglecting ourselves and our own health. This can show up as people pleasing. This is why divorce rates among women are higher. This is the time period where you might be fed up and you literally cannot tolerate one more, "Hey, honey, is there extra ketchup? Have you seen my sock? Have you seen my shirt?" The door squeaks and you want to rip it off its hinges. Someone makes a random noise outside and you're contemplating murder. This is all hormonally driven. And I think it's important to acknowledge and understand that. It doesn't make it any less real or any less valid. And I know for me personally, as someone who is still kind of riding some hormonal roller coasters right now, after everything I've been through this year, it's helpful for me to acknowledge that. And I also verbally share that with my partner. And I'll be like, "Hey, Jonathan, I ovulated a few days ago. I am 9 days out from my period, and I am feeling like a rage monster today. I'm probably not going to talk to you very much. I'm probably even going to avoid eye contact a little bit because the rage cyclone that is in my body right now, like, is not very supportive, and I'm trying to manage the best I can, and my goal is not to take this out on you." And those are real conversations I have with him that, at first I felt like for me, he was like, "Okay, okay, cool. Like, I don't really get it, but okay, okay." And now he's able to give me a little bit more of that space because I really try and communicate that. And I try and communicate that at all times. During ovulation, I try and communicate that and the benefits that can come around that. Right before my period, "Hey, I am feeling super bloated today. I am just like, I feel like I'm on the verge of tears right now. Just give me some space or can you hold me? Can you love on me a little bit extra today?" Like what feels supportive for me? And I try and actively communicate that. Or say, "Please don't touch me today until I ask for it because I feel like I want to rip your head off just by you existing as a human being. I love you, and this is a hormonal thing going on. It's in my body today." So just so we're all aware. And that helps to keep some peace. And once again, I have a partner who is supportive, who tries to understand the best he absolutely can and tries to show up for me the best way possible. Our relationship is built around pretty strong and open communication the best we can. We are not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, and we do our best. And I do think that goes a long way for both of us. And I know not everyone's significant other is like that. There is a reason I'm divorced, and that piece of it played a huge role in it. And so the goal here is ideally you're in a relationship where if you are in a relationship or getting into a relationship, be open and communicative about this. And I know, once again, I know firsthand how frustrating it can be to be the leader, the educator, the why don't we do this together? Can we go to therapy? Can we do this course? Can we read this book together? Like all of these things, I have been in that position as the leader, and I know how exhausting it is. And I know at some point, most of us are like, I cannot do this anymore. And some women get divorced, some women just kind of give up. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think it depends on you and you as a person and your relationship and what feels best for you. And this is a conversation that I have with a lot of clients as well as we continue to dive deeper into the nervous system and trauma side of things as part of the healing process. So, invitation here to be as open as you can and give your partner a chance. And also, you don't have to put up with a bunch of BS, and that is okay too. Okay, so what else is going on during this time? The cognitive side of things can really become apparent here, especially as our estrogen drops. The brain fog, the trouble concentrating. If you already had a history of ADD, ADHD, this can be greatly exacerbated. I also think some women are diagnosed with ADD and ADHD in their 40s and 50s that maybe it hasn't been there all your life and now it feels like it is there. And this can be driven by estrogen. And once again, like I believe ADD and ADHD are real things. And I do think it is overdiagnosed in many. I've seen it be quote unquote reversed from a toxin load, from a gut health standpoint, from a hormonal shifting standpoint. And the reality is it does exist as well. So we may see a lot of changes in this. Memory issues, just like mental fatigue. You just don't have the same capacity or space that you used to. And once again, because of that, that can go back into some of the mental and emotional stuff. And that can make even the mental and emotional stuff worse or exacerbated. You know, you walk into the kitchen and you're like, I know I needed something in here and I have no clue what that actually was. You know, you may start to really, I mean, like significant recall issues with like people that you see every day, not remembering their name off the top of your head. This was a really big one for me. I'm already not the best with names. I'm a visual person, so it's very helpful for me to not only hear a name, but also see it and then be able to repeat it several times. That helps it lock into my brain. And when I was in perimenopause, essentially I had no chance. I had to like write down names, like read it, see it, say it. And then sometimes it would still be a little bit of an issue. We also might see sexual function, libido, vaginal dryness, like all of those things start to really become an issue. We also might see the weight gain, weight shifting, especially in the lower belly. This, like all of a sudden, weight gain overnight in your lower belly. And I do want to talk a little bit deeper about this side of things too, and why this is happening, and some of the big things that's not technically hormonal that we can support during this process. But weight shifts, it might be harder to build muscle. You might really start to lose muscle mass. You might be eating the exact same things and working out the exact same, and all of a sudden you gained 10, 15, 20, 30 pounds, seemingly overnight. This is largely estrogen driven. And once again, I'm going to talk a little bit about the adrenals and the role of the adrenals when it comes to like perimenopause and menopause, because this also plays an important role. We may also see some other things like headaches, migraines, joint pain, muscle aches, just like more aching, lower recovery time. I will say the increase in recovery time is something that sometimes we don't have a lot of control over. And I will say for some women, if we do proper testing, this is where testosterone specifically can be very supportive for some women. Certainly, sex drive, muscle, like building muscle mass, maintaining muscle mass can be really helpful, but also for recovery time is a big piece that can come into play here. And this is where testosterone in particular I see from an HRT standpoint, be very supportive for some women who do actually need it. I also want to recognize, and once again, from an educational standpoint, there is a big board that focuses on women's health, specifically with perimenopause and menopause and hormone replacement therapy. I do not remember the name of the board off the top of my head. I guarantee a quick Google search will bring this up. You may have seen recently that the black box label, this big warning label on estrogen, has been removed. This group had a part in that. And it appears, and a lot of conspiracy theories here as to why this was put in there in the first place. And the black box warning was about estrogen and breast cancer. And we know now that the rate of breast cancer in most women who are on estrogen, it may increase it I'm talking a minimal, less than 1% amount. And when we think about all of the other things that estrogen can help with, which once again, I don't think I'll get to it in this episode, so I'll probably do a part 3 to this, of what does estrogen really do for our body? It's likely worth it for most women. And I'll tell you that, especially as someone who is very just had a little dabble in the cancer space with Jonathan this year. I do think there are a lot of misconceptions about cancer. And when we look at bigger root causes, and one of the first people we're going to have on next year is a cancer expert, functional cancer expert, to dive deeper into this and chat more about this, because I think there's a lot to say about this and a lot to dig into. Toxin load, parasite overgrowth in particular. I've seen some of these studies, and I've now looked at a lot of these studies, and I'm a firm believer that those two things in particular, I'll say that the connection between parasite overgrowth and cancer, there's some really strong research out there and some really strong studies showing that can have a massive role in the onset of cancer. So I also think there's some misconceptions about cancer and what we've been taught and led to believe. And once again, largely that's only come about because of my firsthand experience this year with Jonathan and his cancer diagnosis and treatment and talking to all the doctors. And once again, we were so fortunate. We had such a great team. And I asked a lot of questions, and I was just like really curious about their thoughts on a lot of things. And they were by and large very happy to appease most of my questions and share what they thought and what their answers and what they've learned being in the space. Now, this same group, that the same governing body, is still telling women not to be on testosterone and not to recommend testosterone in any form or fashion for perimenopausal and menopausal women, which I think is a huge mistake. I don't think everyone needs it. I don't think this is the only option. And I think for many women, and once again, I've worked with plenty of women on HRT, BHRT, that, wow, testosterone made a massive difference in their health, in their mood, and their body's ability to recover from workouts, to build more muscle mass. And I'm not talking bodybuilder size muscle mass. I am talking basic muscle, to look like a leaner, healthier individual, not from a bulky, big, super toned, super shredded kind of standpoint here. And look, if that's the way you want to look, like, totally good for you. But also for the average woman, most women don't want to look like that, which is fine. And a certain level of muscle mass is extremely healthy, extremely beneficial for so many things, including recovery time, including building muscle, including joint health, and including bone health, cognitive health, sex drive, which is used not only for our health, but also for the health of many of our relationships, which we know relationships are one of the fundamental pieces. Having community, having good relationships with people is a huge, huge factor in our overall health as we get older. This has been proven time and time again. So I do think it is relevant when we're talking about this. Let's see. We may also experience skin and hair changes, hair getting thinner, hair falling out more, just hair really shifting overall, and not your hair just is not the same. Might be really brittle. We also might see our skin get very crepey and or thin. And those are really common things here. So, one of the big things that is happening as we're getting into this perimenopausal stage, and this is very true, particularly in this mid to later stage of perimenopause, is our ovaries are stopping hormone production. And what hormones we are still producing, our adrenals are taking over that. And we've done plenty of episodes on cortisol, on adrenal health. Like, please go listen to those. And I'm going to walk you through a few of these other things. Another really good episode to listen to, and I think I referenced this last time too, is the stress bucket episode, where I talk about stress and the true definition of what is stress, what is stressful on our bodies. I think that's a really valuable episode, especially when we're talking about any or all of this. So our adrenals are taking over. And our adrenals are connected to a couple things. Our hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, so our HPA axis, which many people are familiar with, adrenal health, adrenal fatigue, cortisol, all of those things are related to adrenal health. Those first two things are our hypothalamus and pituitary is also connected to our thyroid, which is why many women are put on thyroid meds, which I mentioned last time. Now, when we have been stressed out for a period of time, and I will say for most women we work with, I'm talking over a decade of significant and chronic stress, your adrenals cannot handle one other thing. They are already borderline at capacity and or over capacity. And this is where taking things out of our stress bucket can go a long way in helping with this whole transitionary process that we all go through, but also we even like really into full-blown menopause when we're at that stage. So I also firmly believe this is a piece of the lack of tolerance, I'll say, for a lot of these things. The, once again, I don't give an F kind of attitude that many women start to display in perimenopause. And our adrenals are impacted by so many things. If you're not eating well, if you're not getting the nutrients that you need, if you're not moving, if you're not building strength, if you're over exercising, if you're under exercising, if you're drinking too much caffeine, if you're drinking caffeine on an empty stomach, if you never see the light of day, if you don't sleep well, if you don't get enough sleep, if you have gut issues, if you have toxin overload issues, if you have liver and drainage pathway dysfunction, if you've had organs removed, if you've had multiple surgeries, all of these things will contribute to stress. And there's a giving point. And once again, this is usually that time where your body says, I am done. I have no more room. I have no more capacity. And now some of these other things are getting worse. And your adrenals are like, I have nothing left to give you right now. And so I'm going to make this process even worse. And this is really where a lot of that lower belly fat starts to come into play. This is when we think about that specific lower belly fat and really not being able to get rid of that, even if we've lost weight throughout the entirety of the rest of our body, that lower belly fat, and we think about the puffy face, that moon puffy face. This is all related to adrenal health, to cortisol issues. And these are all signs where if you have not prepped your body going into this phase and you are already at capacity, if you are just so stressed out, of course this process is going to be way worse because your adrenals have nothing left to give you. They cannot take on another job. and helping you produce some of these hormones that your ovaries are stopping to produce. And that goes a really long way in supporting our body, in our body temperature regulation, in our weight loss. Our thyroid also has a lot to do with metabolism, to do with can also play a role in our temperature, our body temperature. This is why that people, especially hypothyroid type of individuals, I mean, your body can be hot, but your hands and feet are typically always going to be cold. And it's not necessarily a circulation issue, it can be. And for many of those women, and especially as someone with a history of hypothyroidism, that is a clear-cut sign. Just your hands and your feet are always cold. And once again, your whole rest of the body can be warm and or hot, but these extremities. And it's because, and it's really your brain that's controlling this, but it's the hypothalamus pituitary thyroid axis. So it's all three of these things that are playing a role here. And once again, Western medicine does not do a great job of this because they're only looking at our TSH, which is a brain producing chemical, and then our T4, which is produced in our thyroid, but is an inactive form of thyroid hormone that our body cannot use. So these are really important things to keep into mind here. So sometimes for many women, especially in early perimenopause, oftentimes we'll start supporting the adrenals while we're working on other things, but we're very focused on adrenal health as we're lowering toxin load, as we're working on gut health, as we're working on other things going on, because this can dissipate a lot of these hormonal perimenopausal type symptoms and or lessen the burden of them. So we might use things like two of the big things that we will often use, especially early on in adrenal health. The first one is adrenal cocktails. I mentioned adrenal cocktails last time. Huge fan, such a great tool to have in our toolbox. They're easy. It's a food first kind of thing. Yes, you can do a supplement, but it's really simple. The other thing is something to help manage your cortisol and lower your cortisol in the evening, which can help with sleep. Once again, if we can help improve sleep, this can go a long way. And especially if we're having a really hard time falling asleep, if our brain is really going, we're having a hard time, quote unquote, calming our brain down, this can be really helpful. Those 3 a.m. wake ups, this can be really helpful. And that is a product called Cortisol Manager by Integrative Therapeutics. Now, there are other tools. Ashwagandha is a very common tool. There is ashwagandha in Cortisol Manager. Rhodiola can be another really good one. We can talk about adaptogenic mushrooms. Something like reishi can be very supportive for many people. It really just depends on the person. You know, for someone like me, I tend to have some of the weirder side effects and or reactions to things. For me, ashwagandha causes breathing problems after a few days. And I've tested this many times with blends and also with just straight up ashwagandha. It's usually after about 3 days, I start to have difficulty breathing, and I can even present almost like an asthmatic. It's not, I just need to stay off of the ashwagandha for a couple days and those things go away completely. And this actually, I first noticed this several years ago and I thought I actually was diagnosed with asthma. And I go, I don't have asthma. There is something else going on and I don't know what it is yet, but I'm going to figure it out. It was the ashwagandha. I had just started a new product and it had a bunch of ashwagandha in it. And I titrated it out and tried several different things. So, and for most women, ashwagandha is very supportive. And we're all different. We can all react to different things in different ways, and this can be one of those. So, something to keep in mind here. So, that is kind of like mid to late perimenopause. And then let's kind of wrap up here with kind of actual menopause. And this is defined clinically as 12 months without a period. If you go 11 months and have a period, this can shift. If you go, here's the other thing that I've seen and just want to be mindful of. I've seen people go into menopause and then start working with us. And they end up getting a period back, which I know can be very frustrating for some women. They're like, I thought I was done with this. And it's like, look, like, yes. And this also shows me that you were driven into earlier menopause than your body was actually ready for because of the amount of stress going on inside of your body. This is a very, very real thing. It doesn't happen to everyone, and I have seen it probably a couple dozen occasions of women, especially in their later 40s, early 50s. I'll even say mid to late 40s into the early 50s. So this is something that can happen, something we've seen. The other thing I wanted to mention that I forgot to put in my notes here is body odor changes. And I just had a client email me late last week about this. And she goes, why is my body odor changing? All of a sudden, I have this body odor that I haven't never had, and I just don't get it. And by itself, it can mean a couple different things. When we think about body odor, usually the first thing I think of is your body's trying to push out toxins. I'll say for me, that is one of the first signs that I know I need to do some extra detox and drainage pathway support work because my body's struggling to push all of it out the way it's supposed to. This is one of the reasons why I love consistently getting into a sauna at least once a week if I can, because this helps. This helps to really push things out and help for me in particular, this is one of the most helpful things for me. And I think it's helpful for everyone if your body's in a place that it can handle it, because this is a stressor as well. And if you have mast cell and histamine issues, this can be a trigger for some people who are heat sensitive, and it can trigger exacerbated histamine issues, in which case this is not the most supportive for you. But as our hormones change, this can also happen. And a lot of times what we'll see is as our progesterone starts to dip and we see these estrogen fluctuations, when estrogen's higher, your body's going to try and push more of it out because it recognizes that it has a good amount of it and we can smell it. And that can contribute to change in body odor. So I totally forgot to add that into my notes here. This can happen at almost any stage for reference as well. I'll say most often we will see this in early, somewhere between like not super early perimenopause. I'd say like late, early, middle, later stage perimenopause is when we'll often kind of see this. I know that's a super broad range that I just gave, but it can happen as well. And those are things that we will see. So, all right, menopause, 12 months without a period. The average age that I've been able to see here from my research is 51. This will happen. There is a wide variety. I'll say just from a personal experience of working with thousands of women in my career at this point, it's really all over the place. I mean, I've worked with women who have been in full-blown menopause in their late 30s. I've also worked with women going into their early 60s who still get a period now and then and again. So it can happen. And especially if you are on HRT, this can really push it out, not necessarily in a bad way, but you can continue to get a period, which I don't think is necessarily a bad thing as long as you're working with someone who is specializing in this and is regularly running labs and checking in on symptoms and all the other things too. So at this point in time, our ovaries have really largely stopped producing regular progesterone and estrogen. Ovulation is going to cease, and our hormones are going to be more stable and low, which is not necessarily a bad thing. And I think a lot of women really could benefit once again from hormonal support, especially earlier on than this time. And it's also never too late. And when I get into in the next episode of what are hormones really doing for our body, I think this will make a lot more sense as to why this might be pretty beneficial here. So we may continue to see hot flashes and night sweats continue. Unfortunately, they will stop at some point, and we may still see these things happen. We really may see some significant issues when it comes to vaginal dryness, into like very low libido, urinary pelvic floor kind of issues, UTIs. We may get a lot of pain, discomfort in our pelvic floor. I will say, just once again, as someone who has been in not menopause, but perimenopause and had a lot of pelvic floor dysfunction, one of the best things I think anyone, male or female, but especially women, whether or not you've had children, is to see a really good quality pelvic floor physical therapist. And for me, and what I see this a lot with our clients that we work with who do end up seeing a pelvic floor specialist, is a lot of times they will do ultrasounds on externally, looking at like that low belly piece, and they'll look at your TVA and they'll look at all these small little muscles, and they have you do exercises to help to activate and stimulate, and you can see imbalances. You can see how your muscles are compensating, maybe not activating the most beneficial ways, just other things, compensation patterns. And man, did I find that beneficial by a huge amount. Just, and especially, I know I'm a nerd in this stuff, and especially as my personal training background, being able to see through an ultrasound how these muscles are working, how cool. Just, man, the amount of real-time data that we get with that, so, so, so cool. The other thing that they can do, and I've seen some hesitation by some physical therapists when it comes to this, especially with women who have a history of trauma, and especially if the pelvic floor physical therapist is trauma informed, is a lot of times they will do a vaginal ultrasound where they're going to go, use a, and I've donated eggs, so I already knew what this was, because this is how they would look at your ovaries and egg count and all that kind of stuff. But they look at the muscles really from a different perspective internally, and they can also get a lot of data from that. And once again, if you can go see one of these physical therapists, and I don't think for most women, I don't think we need a lot of sessions. I saw her maybe 10 to 14 times over the course of probably 2 years, year and a half, 2 years. And she would give me some exercises, some different ways to think about when it came to lifting, all that kind of stuff that I found hugely beneficial and still use to this day. And as I'm getting back into more movement, into more strength training, now, again, these are things that I'm very aware of. And I'm very aware that my pelvic floor isn't as strong as it used to be, that my whole core and abdominal region isn't as strong as it used to be. And once again, I have this background and all these tools that when I'm going to strengthen these things again, it's so much easier. I'm able to really connect with my body and focus on that connection, which is going to help with muscle strength and also help with balance and overall health and stability. One of the other things that happens, and this is not specifically hormone related, although we could indirectly tie it here, is most of us, as we age, male and female, we start to lose our balance, and our balance becomes not as good. And one of the things that I would always do with my older clients, and once again, I specialized in quote unquote advanced age personal training for several years, is we would focus on balance. And a lot of that goes back to core strength, pelvic floor health, activating and learning how to activate glute muscles and different parts of our body around our generalized midsection here. And I think the pelvic floor work can be really beneficial. And it can also help with some of these issues that we may experience through menopause here. We may see exacerbated issues when it comes to metabolic health, which would be like the weight gain, fat distribution, decreased muscle mass, bone density, joint health, all of those things we may see continue to be exacerbated. And there is an increased risk. And once again, in the next part of this, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this, of women are more prone to osteoporosis and osteopenia, which is a lack of bone density. And we can get bone density scans and see this. Once again, I've also seen in a handful of older clients in their 70s and 80s specifically reverse both osteoporosis and osteopenia through proper strength training once or twice a week and nutritional changes that largely focuses on increased protein intake. We can limit a lot of this, and there is a hormone piece to it, both in estrogen and testosterone. And so once again, this is where hormone replacement therapy may be supportive for some women in certain circumstances that can help with a variety of health issues, including this one. We may see continued cognitive shifts. Sleep problems may continue to linger. They may also shift a little bit, and they may just feel different. Skin, hair, energy, all of those things may continue to get worse for a period of time, but at some point, all of these things should stabilize. And once again, you may not feel like yourself. You may not feel good. And this is because your hormones are low. And I think that's okay that our hormones are low, assuming the rest of our health is in a pretty good spot. And I think there is good science and knowledge and data for the people who do want hormonal support through HRT, BHRT. I think there is good research around this, and I think it can be very, very helpful for a lot of women. And once again, it's a very personal decision. I think you need to find the right practitioner, the right provider to do this, because I've also seen it done horribly wrong, and with providers who don't do very good testing, who don't keep an eye out on things, who are recommended forms of different hormones that are just maybe not the most beneficial. And so all of these things can play a really, really big role here. So all things to think about. And once again, I am working on getting someone who specializes in HRT on here to dive deeper into all of this, because that is not my area of expertise by any stretch. So those are the big things that can happen here. And so I think I'll wrap up here, and then I can easily spend another 30 to 60 minutes talking about the role that hormones actually play in our long-term health, and some other reasons why we may want to practice hormonal support of some kind, whether that's through, once again, nutrition, whether it's supplements, whether it's through something like HRT, BHRT. There's a variety of options here, and I think it's just really important to understand, once again, what is actually going in our body, and some of these things that happen that women are more prone to as we get older. Two of the big ones that I know I'm absolutely going to be talking about is heart health, cardiovascular health, brain health are two really, really big ones. I'm going to be talking about Alzheimer's in particular, and heart attacks, especially, and heart issues, because we are largely missed. And I really think the hormonal side of things is dismissed by Western medicine when it comes to why are women more prone to many of these issues. So I'll wrap up here, and hopefully this was really helpful. If you have additional questions on maybe things that you are experiencing, about maybe symptoms I didn't talk about in these first two episodes that you really want us to talk about and touch on, comment anywhere on social media, comment on this video. You can send us a DM on any social media platform. You can also email us info@trifectacollective.net. If you are looking for deeper support when it comes to hormones and looking at the overall stress in your body, once again, we offer free consultations. We'd love to chat with you, dig a little bit deeper here, looking at symptoms, health history. If you have any labs or anything from the last 12 to 18 months, we'll happily look at those as well to start helping you put some pieces together here. We mostly work with women who are experiencing some of these. It is not often that and yes, we do. It is not often, though, that we work with someone who's not experiencing any sort of hormonal shifts going on of any sort. And we also do work with women who are trying to conceive. So hormones are always a big thing. Anytime we work with any sort of female, we're always going to talk and look at and continue to monitor hormones, because it plays such a big role in our lives. And it can be frustrating, especially with Western medicine and their lack of education around women's hormones and cycles and all the things. And their only real answer is birth control, SSRIs, and maybe metformin. And so I think, yeah, just the more we can know and understand our bodies, the better. And there's a lot of strengths that we have as women that are largely driven by hormones. And I think those are to be celebrated, and also acknowledge that our body's not always the same. Our mood's not always the same. Things aren't always the same. And that can be really frustrating, especially when we live in a male-dominated world. And There's a lot of strength and a lot of power if we choose to acknowledge it and use those. So, thank you for listening. As always, please like, subscribe, follow if it resonates. 5-star reviews really, really, really mean the world to us. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week and hope you have a great day.